week, Parashat Korach. Korach is very famous for the story of Korach. Korach and his Ada, as we call it. Korach and his people, as we call it. However, very interestingly, when you look in the Psukim, it wasn't only about Korach. There were actually a few other people there. Dotan and Aviram very specifically take a big part in this argument, and we ask, what are they actually about? What is going on over here?
Yeah, we realize it's like a story inside of a story that goes around and focuses on them. And we realize that Dotan and Aviram, which we've heard so much about, actually never showed up before by name. This is the first time they showed up, and we wondered, why do Chazal take these two peoples? What in this story makes Dotan and Aviram the bad guys that are always there in every single story, going back all the way to the time of Egypt?
Exactly. They're always there in the background. This is the first time we meet them, and for a reason. Not only do we meet them here, not only are they a story within a story, but apparently they are the story of Korach. What exactly is the role in this argument? Because they have a super crucial role in this story of Korach. Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. So yes, this week, Parashat Korach, here in Eretz Yisrael, the very famous story of Korach stepping up and arguing with Moshe, the archetype of arguments, of machloket in Am Yisrael, of Korach arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu, having a big machloket with him. And very interestingly, when you look in the Psukim, it actually wasn't only Korach involved over there. We find a few other names. We find Dotan and Aviram on Minpelet, but more specifically, we also find Moshe not only responding to Korach and his Eidah and the 250 people with him, but also specifically calling out Dotan and Aviram, calling Dotan and Aviram to come to him. Now, we know these names. We know these names since day one, since Sefer Shmot. We've always heard these names, Dotan and Aviram, but really, this is the first time we meet them in the Torah. This is the first place we're seeing them here in the Torah. And you really have to ask, what is their involvement in this story over here? Why does Moshe Rabbeinu take so much time and effort to call them over? And not only that they not come and with such a chutzpah answer him, we're not going to come over to you. Moshe Rabbeinu then goes to them. And all the story of the land opening up and swallowing Korach actually happened in their tent, happened by them. So what is the story of Dotan and Aviram? Is this part of the story of Korach, which collectively, when we talk about Korach, we never mention them. It's always Korach ve'adato, Korach and his crowd. This is somewhat of a different story going on over here. Is there something more to Dotan and Aviram? What are they all about? What is their story all about?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You pointed out that Dotan and Aviram have been there always, because it's fascinating. If we look at Chazal, we look at Rashi, we see Dotan and Aviram everywhere. Anytime something goes wrong, going back from in Egypt, when the two people are fighting, the two Jews are fighting, and Moshe says, why do you do that? And they turn to him and says, oh, you're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? Chazal tell us, oh, that was Dotan and Aviram. When we see later, when we see the people complaining about going back to Egypt, it's always Dotan and Aviram, Dotan and Aviram, Dotan and Aviram. And it's fascinating to find out that it isn't. It doesn't say anywhere in the Psukim that it is Dotan and Aviram. Why do Chazal tell us that every single one of these stories is Dotan and Aviram if we just meet them here for the first time? There's obviously something in this story which makes Chazal say, oh, these are the ones that were there and there and there and there. Something about this story is so dramatic that these people turn into the evil archetypes. Every single time we have evil, maybe every single time we have an opposition to Moshe, it's gotta be them. They were the ones who were there with Moshe when he was a young man by Paro, and they're the ones here at this argument as well. So what is it about them that makes them so unique in a negative way? And I think if we look at the flow of the Psukim, we can start to understand what's happening here. Because it starts really, as you mentioned, with Korach and Dotan and Aviram and others. And they come and they complain what they complain. But Moshe falls on his face maybe, but then gives them a response. He says, okay, you know what? This is what we're going to do. You'll come, we'll see who's really the chosen one. And then he goes on to speak separately with Shevet Levi, and he talks to Korach and his people about them. You know, they've been chosen for so much. Why are they complaining? And when it seems that everything's sort of under control, okay, there's an argument, there's a fight, but we have a plan, we'll resolve it. But then there's a twist in the story, because then Moshe calls to bring Dotan and Aviram. And the first thing we notice is they don't want to come. What do you mean you don't want to come? I thought you want to be leaders. You want something. When you want something, the first thing you do if you want something is you step up. And they're not ready to step up. They're staying in their tent. So what's going on here? But it doesn't end there, because Because when we listen to what they say, it's unbelievable. They're not even talking about what the discussion was about, being leaders, about being holy. What are they talking about? They're using Moshe's words, who just said to the Levim, "Hame'at mikem." They use the same words and they twist it all around. But it goes more than that. They talk about things were great in Egypt. Why'd you take us out? Okay, you can say things were great in Egypt. Listen to the words they use. They call Egypt Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. Look how professional these guys are. They choose the exact words and twist it all around. They're showing everyone, look how Moshe has been fooling us. He gave us Zavat Chalav Udvash. That's where we came from. And they go on to say, everything you told us was all a lie, etc., etc. When we look at their words, we don't find anything about what they actually want. What we do find is professionals at turning everything around and making it into a fight. And maybe that's what Moshe finally understands. Moshe, who's always trying to see the good in everyone, and he's always there when Am Yisrael sinned, he stands up for them. Suddenly Moshe turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, don't accept their korban. Whose korban? What korban are we talking about? They're far from bringing a korban at this point. But that's not it. Moshe is the one who turns around and realizes something else here. Every single time, I'm the one who's telling you to accept their korban, to forgive them, to have mercy on them. Now I'm telling you the opposite, because I found these two, they're not like everyone else. There is true evil. There are people who what they want is to fight. That's what they want. Just like there's good in the world, as we learn in Kohelet, Zel umat ze asa Elohim. And Chazal teach us, God created the good and he created the bad, the tzaddikim and the reshaim. If there's good in the world, if there's a Moshe in the world, there's always going to be an anti-Moshe in the world. That's what creates this world, that creates the balance in this world. And when Moshe recognizes that, and as the Gemara teaches us in Megillah, Hu Dotan and Aviram berish'am mitchilatam v'ad sofam. They were in their evil from beginning to the end. These aren't just another people who want something, who are jealous, who want to be rich, who even bad things. That's not that. These are people that what they want is the fight itself. And maybe that's why also the story takes a turn here. Moshe realizes that he can't just continue with the plan he said before. He needs something else, something new, something to separate. And as we discussed last year, Korach is grouping everyone together and Moshe is trying to separate. No, not everyone is the same. There are different things going on here. And Moshe separates them. He doesn't continue with the original plan until he separates, and he needs a new creation. Something entirely different, which will say and point out these people, they're not part of the story. They may be screaming everyone together, everyone screaming with them, but I found out that they're not like everyone else. They're maybe pulling everyone after them because they're professionals. They know how to use the right words. They know how to bring everyone with them. But if you just pull them out, you'll see everything changing. So in essence, the story of the earth opening up is not about Korah. It's about Dotan and Aviram. And we see this later on in Bamidbar, where it describes Dotan and Aviram and the land that opened up for them and for Korah. Korah got pulled in with them. They're the story of the land opening up. Everything else here is about Korah. It's about people wanting different things, understanding concept of Kedusha, being chosen like Aaron, etc. All that's everything else. But their story, we have to separate their story from everything else. And what's fascinating is maybe that's exactly what Chazal were trying to do. Maybe Chazal, in every single place where they're telling us this is the Dotan and Aviram, what they're actually saying is this isn't everyone else. You may hear many people screaming, it's not everyone, it's the Dotan and Aviram. And it doesn't matter if it was really them or the same type. The point is, it's those few that are there to make a fight, and they'll always bring everyone with them. But if you pull them out of the crowd, you'll see that everyone really wants good. They're confused. They're pulled in by the argument, but it's not about them. And that's what happens here. Finally, Moshe, after all this time, recognized this, and then he pulls them out of the crowd and separates. He tells Am Yisrael, separate yourself. And when that happens, Moshe is able to continue and take care of what's really going on here. But what's fascinating is, after this, we have 38 years of silence. No more complaints. No more. What about all these people who were just complaining a minute ago? It wasn't all of them. Once you pull Dotan and Aviram out, everything changes.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, there's so many lines we can draw to today, to what's going on in our society here in Eretz Yisrael today. But really, one of the things that it is important to notice about the story of Dotan and Aviram is not that it's a story that's kind of being swallowed into the story, pun intended, into the story of Korach and Adato, but maybe this is the story of Korach and Adato, because Korach steps up and he has his reasons. He wants Kehuna. Moshe says to him, Bigashtem gam Kehuna, you also want Kehuna. You have Leviah, you have being Shevet Levi. heavy. Why do you need also kuna? Kuna is HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided. It's not me that decided these things. And then Moshe has this test that they're going to carry out, the 250 Nesiim, together with Aaron to see who Hashem chooses. And as we discussed last year, suddenly there's kind of a change of plan and this new thing of the earth opening up and swallowing Korach and the Dotan and Aviram happens. But then again, we go back to the first test, to that initial test of the pans. And instead of burning one pan to see who is chosen, it burns all the 250 people. And we discussed that last year, why this happened, why this change happened. But maybe this is another important ingredient in the story that is needed to point out what is Dotan and Aviram's role in all this story of Korach, because their role is the most crucial role in this story, because there would have not have been a Korach without Dotan and Aviram. Like you were saying, like the Midrash says, like the Midrash points out, since day one, since the second Moshe Rabbeinu stepped out from the palace for the first time, and he saw an Ish Mitzri, Makeh Ish Ivri, and he did something, apparently Dotan and Aviram were already there in the background. They saw that. And then the next day, they pop up and show up and say, oh, you're going to do to us what you did yesterday? They've been lurking Moshe since day one. They were always there in the background. They are this anti-Moshe that is there. Every time Moshe says something, they step up and say, no, let's do something else. When Moshe comes back from Paro and says, I went to Paro and told them, they're the ones complaining and saying, oh, you just made things worse. When they get to Yamsuf and the Mitzrayim are running after Am Yisrael, they're the ones who get up and say, let's go back to Mitzrayim. They're the ones who after Chet HaMeraglim said, let's go back to Mitzrayim. Nidna Rosh v'nashuva Mitzrayim, and let's get a new leadership and head back to Mitzrayim. These are the guys that were always there against Moshe, and they were always trying to stir up the pot, trying to get this hatred to this level, which is enough to hit Moshe, to take Moshe down. And here, suddenly, now they have their opportunity, because we have to pay attention to what they're saying. Their argument is not the argument that Korach is saying. And like we said so many times in our videos, you have to pay attention to the Hebrew the Torah uses, to the language the Torah uses, because what is their response to Moshe when Moshe calls them? They say, Lo na'aleh, we're not going to go up. They don't respond to Moshe saying, we're not going to come to you. They're saying, Lo na'aleh, we're not going to go up. And these words, Lo na'aleh, sound very, very, very familiar. Why are they familiar? Because this is exactly the argument between Kalev and the Meraglim. Last week's Parsha was about Kalev stood up and said, Alo na'aleh, we shall go up to Eretz Yisrael. And the Meraglim responded and said, we can't go up to Eretz Yisrael. Say now with the Dotan and Aviram, Moshe, you said to us we were going to go into Eretz Yisrael, but we're not going into Eretz Yisrael. You promised us that we were going to go to this land of milk and honey. What are you talking about, Moshe? You lied to us, because we, after Chet HaMeraglim, we are not going into Eretz Yisrael. We're going to die in the desert. This whole generation is going to die with us in the desert. Moshe, where is your promise to us to go into Eretz Yisrael? And by doing this, by getting to this point where these two haters are finally right, you know, as we say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So these two haters are finally right, and they have a generation around them that's very upset about the fact that they're not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. This is now being used by Korach. As the Ramban points out, now Korach feels comfortable enough to step up and argue with Moshe and be in opposition to Moshe, and Korach is using this hatred that was stirred up by Dotan and Aviram, and he's actually riding on the hatred that they created. And as you were pointing out, Dotan and Aviram were always there in the background. They were always stirring up the hatred, not because they wanted leadership. How do I know they didn't want leadership? Because they are two people. Leadership is one person. They both just wanted to make noise. Two is always mi'ut rabim. They're always trying to show like they are the public. We are the public. We are what the society really wants. We are not ourselves. We are talking and demanding in the name of the entire public around us. Doesn't matter that they didn't have enough power within them until Korach came along to actually step up. Doesn't matter that they don't have enough mandates in Am Yisrael. That doesn't matter for them. What matters is that their hatred managed to conquer enough hearts in this disguise of Korach, in this disguise of needing a new leadership, that now this hatred spread out, and now we have this full rebellion against Moshe for the first time. This is what they managed to cause. They've been trying since day one to stir the pot, to create this hatred, to have this hatred spread out as much as possible, and finally they got their chance. Finally they got their opportunity, and Korach is riding on top of this. This is what Dotan and Aviram are about, and like you pointed out, maybe this is why at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, when we go through the names in Perek Kavav over there, the Torah tells us this is the Dotan and Aviram that were killed by the earth opening up and swallowing them. And maybe this is also why specifically the earth opened up and swallowed them, because again, this is a very interesting concept of the earth opening up. We talked about the idea of having a new Bria a new creation in order to take care of this argument, in order to prove that Moshe is the one that has to lead Am Yisrael. But maybe specifically the earth had to open up for a few reasons. First of all, because they said, we are not moving from here. We're staying put. So, okay, if you're staying put, well, the earth is going to open up. But also more than that, the earth has one job. The earth has a job to grow things. Vatotzeh haaretz, we know from Sefer Bereshit, the earth has to take out from it. But over here, the earth does the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. It swallows the Dotan and Aviram. Instead of taking out, instead of growing something, it swallows them in. And not only that they said to Moshe, lo na'aleh, the Torah points out twice, vayardu chaim she'ola, they were taken down. They said, we're not going to go up. So fine. They said, we're going to stay in our place. Fine. You're going to stay in your place. And not only are you not going to go up, the earth is going to open up and you're going to be swallowed down into the earth. This punishment is exactly the punishment that Dotan and Aviram had to suffer in order to take care of this hatred once and for all. Because like you were saying, these guys were pros in propaganda. They were pros in copywriting and getting the right sentences and saying the right things to stir the pot, to get the people upset. They've had many years of experience building up to this point to hone their craft, to perfect their messages. And this is exactly what the Torah is telling us. These guys would always take reality and twist it around and spin it around for their hatred, for the hatred-filled agenda. Comes the Torah and says, you know what? We're going to take their reality and we're going to do exactly what they said. No twisting, no spinning, to show that these guys, the whole agenda was only one thing, and that was hatred. That's the only thing they cared about. The only thing they wanted was to be anti-Moshe, to hate on Moshe. The only thing that drove them was to spread this hatred around Am Yisrael. And when you have this hatred being spread out and driving the forces behind the scene, it's hard to have an argument. Again, like we mentioned, the past few years of Parashat Korach, what is a machloket l'shem shamayim? You can have a machloket l'shem shamayim. You can have good arguments. The whole Gemara, the Talmud, everything is based on machlokas. We're not afraid of machloket. We're not afraid to express different opinions. We celebrate different opinions. We literally celebrate different opinions, unlike different parts of the world that claim to celebrate. We really celebrate different opinions. But when it comes to Shem Shamayim, when it's not driven by hatred or by fake equality, but by actually listening to the different opinions, and in order to have a good argument, and in order to have a civil conversation, a civil argument, you have to know how to separate that hatred, because that hatred exists. They are there, like you mentioned, the Gemara says, from day one till the last day, they were always there filled with their hatred, and you have to know how to separate them. And once you do, that's when you can have civil arguments, a civil machloket, and go through the 38 years of the desert without even once hearing about it, and have peace and quiet in order to get to Eretz Yisrael.
So true. And you know what's interesting? If we go back all the way to the beginning, when Moshe is asked to take Am Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, and we look at Rashi there in Chazal, it describes how Moshe doesn't want to. One of the reasons is because he thinks they don't deserve it. And why? Because they're ba'alei lashon hara, because they say bad things. What lashon hara are we talking about? He's talking about the Jews that told Paro that he killed an Egyptian. That's what he's talking about. And who are these Jews? We just said they're Dotan and Aviram. Yeah, but he didn't get that Chazal yet. He didn't read that Midrash. And that's fascinating, because he goes through a process. Hashem tells him basically, no, you're wrong. Am Yisrael do deserve to come out of Mitzrayim. You need to stop thinking badly about Am Yisrael. You need to believe in them. And there Moshe begins his process in leading Am Yisrael. But here he gets to that point where he finally realizes it's them. It's all about them. I see a lot of people talking. I see a lot of people saying bad things. But if I just pull them out and I take care of that, then suddenly everything will change here. So often people, from good reasons, they want to see the good in everyone. They want to believe that everyone has good intentions. Sometimes we lose the bigger picture because we're not ready to point out the few that are usually really a few that are destroying the whole story here. If you get rid of them, get them out of the story, don't pull them in, ignore them, then you can have a real discussion. Then you can focus on the majority that actually do want good and want to have a real productive machloket l'shem shamayim.
Very good, very good. It's so important in order to have a civil argument, in order to have a machloket l'shem shamayim, because there are things that you have to argue about. It's fine to argue about things. There are points, there are ideas that have to be honed, that have to be refined, have to be taken care of, and have to be settled, but you have to know how to separate it from the hatred and put that hatred group aside and not care about them and even throw them away. Let the earth open up and swallow them up. That group that's led by the copywriting, by the advertisers, you have to know how to disconnect from them in order to have a true l'shem shamayim machloket, in order to have a good machloket that will end up with good results, that will end up in the results that we need in order to continue growing and in order to continue building, like we've said so many times in our videos. But we're out of time and enough about politics, so we'll end here. We'll just remind the viewers again that the past few years we talked about Korach and Adato a few times. We linked those videos, and as usual, if you enjoyed this video, below. Feel free to like it, comment below. Even if you didn't like it, we would love to hear why. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and help us grow the channel. And shkoyach Yetzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And Amidst Hashem, we'll talk again next week.